I walked through the front door drenched from the storm, shaking rain from my hair. The house was too bright. Too loud. Music played from somewhere inside. I heard laughter. Lots of it. When I turned the corner into my living room, I froze. 20 people stood around holding champagne glasses and plates of cake. Balloons spelled out "baby shower" across the back wall. In the center of it all stood Amanda, my best friend since college, her pregnant belly obvious under a tight pink dress. My husband Jake had his hand resting on that belly, smiling down at her like she was the only person in the room. Everyone turned to look at me. The music kept playing. Nobody said anything. I was soaked. Uninvited. Standing in my own house like an intruder at someone else's celebration. Jake pulled his hand away from Amanda's stomach like it had burned him. "Honey," he stammered, walking toward me. "I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." But he didn't explain. He just stood there, mouth opening and closing, searching for words that wouldn't come. Amanda put on her sympathy face, the one she used when she wanted to seem caring. "We wanted it to be a surprise," she said softly. A surprise. A baby shower in my living room for my best friend, and nobody thought to tell me. I looked around at the faces. My sister. My coworkers. Women I'd known for years. They all avoided eye contact, suddenly very interested in their drinks and their phones. They didn't even look guilty. That was the part that broke something inside me. They knew. They all knew. And they came anyway. I grabbed my purse and walked back out the door without saying a word. Rain poured down harder now, soaking through my jacket as I got in my car. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Behind me, I could see Jake standing in the doorway, probably trying to decide whether to follow me or go back to his party. He went back inside. I sat there for a long time, engine running, watching water stream down the windshield. This wasn't the first red flag. Just the most public one. Over the past 6 months, things had changed. Amanda canceling plans. Jake working late 3 nights a week. Whispered phone calls he took in the garage. Text messages that disappeared from his phone. I'd noticed. I'd suspected. But I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. Now I knew better. I drove to a hotel and checked in for the night. In the quiet of that sterile room, I started thinking clearly for the first time in months. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Evidence. Then I started digging through old messages, bank statements, calendar events. 6 months ago was when everything shifted. That's when Amanda started wearing looser clothes. When Jake bought a new phone and password-protected everything. When our joint credit card showed charges at restaurants I'd never been to. I opened the Notes app and started writing down dates. Times. Details. If they wanted to play games, I'd play smarter. I'd been suspicious before. Now I was methodical. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. I was going to document everything. Build my case piece by piece. Jake's iPad was synced to his phone. He'd never changed the settings after we got married 5 years ago. That night in the hotel, I logged into the cloud account and started scrolling through deleted messages. There they were. Months of conversations between Jake and Amanda. Inside jokes. Plans to meet up. Vague references that suddenly made perfect sense. "Can't wait to see you tonight. She's working late again, perfect timing. This is getting harder to hide." I took screenshots of everything. Saved them to 3 different places. External hard drive. Cloud storage. Email draft folder. Then I found a photo that made my stomach drop. Jake smiling at his phone. I remembered that day. He'd been texting someone and laughing. I'd asked who. He'd said it was just his brother. It wasn't his brother. It was her. Amanda and I had been best friends for 12 years. We met in college during freshman orientation and became inseparable. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. I was supposed to be godmother to her future children. We'd talked about buying houses on the same street someday, raising our kids together. She knew everything about me. My fears. My dreams. The fights Jake and I had about starting a family. She'd held me while I cried after 2 miscarriages. She'd been there for every awful moment. And now I understood why she'd been so interested in those private details. She wasn't being a good friend. She was gathering information. Learning my weaknesses. Finding gaps she could slip through. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd rewritten our entire history. Every memory was contaminated now. Poisoned by lies. The next morning, I didn't go home. I went to the bank instead. I opened a private account in just my name at a different bank. Then I went to our home office and copied every file related to Jake's business. He'd started a consulting firm 3 years ago, and I'd helped him build it from nothing. I did the accounting. Set up the licensing. Ran payroll for the first 2 years while he focused on getting clients. I'd worked unpaid, believing we were building something together. Now I realized my name was still on half the paperwork. I'd signed the original LLC documents as co-founder. I'd never been removed. Jake probably forgot I was legally entitled to half of everything. That was his first mistake. Underestimating me would be his last. I went back to the house when I knew Jake would be at work. Amanda's car was in the driveway. Perfect. I let myself in quietly and left my phone recording on the kitchen counter, hidden behind the coffee maker. Then I went upstairs to pack some clothes. I could hear them talking in the living room. Amanda's voice carried up the stairs. She's too dumb to ever figure it out. Even if she suspects something, she won't do anything. She never does. Jake laughed. You're probably right. She'll forgive me like she always does. My hands stopped moving. I stood there in the bedroom, listening to them mock me in my own house. That recording would end up being very useful later. I grabbed my suitcase and walked back downstairs. They didn't even hear me leave. 2 days later, Amanda sent me a text message. But it wasn't meant for me. It was a photo of a nursery. Pale yellow walls. A white crib. Stuffed animals on shelves. The message read, "Can't wait for you to see the baby's room finished." I stared at that photo for a full minute before I understood. That was my guest bedroom. The one we'd painted yellow last month because Jake said he wanted to brighten up the house. He'd built that crib. Hung those shelves. Prepared a nursery in our home for Amanda's baby. For his baby. Because that's what this was. The timeline made sense now. Amanda was 7 months pregnant. Jake and I had been trying to conceive for 3 years with no success. And here they were, building a family behind my back. That text message was her slip-up. And just like that, they were both done. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Patricia Holmes, and she specialized in divorce cases involving business assets. I brought everything. The screenshots. The bank statements. The recording from the kitchen. The accidentally sent nursery photo. The LLC documents showing my name as co-founder. Patricia spread everything across her conference table and studied it carefully. When she looked up, she was smiling. "You have an incredibly strong case," she said. "Your husband has been using joint funds for an affair, preparing to leave you, and potentially hiding business income. And you have documentation of all of it." She paused. "Most people come to me angry and emotional. You came prepared. That's going to make all the difference." I hired her on the spot. Jake thought I'd cry. Instead, I hired a forensic accountant. I didn't move out. I didn't ask Jake to leave. I stayed in the house and acted normal. I cooked dinner. Kissed him goodbye in the mornings. Asked about his day. He thought everything was fine. That I'd forgiven the baby shower incident. That we were moving past it. One night, I suggested we go out to dinner. "Just us," I said. "We need to reconnect." He agreed immediately, probably relieved I wasn't still angry. At dinner, I gave him chances to tell the truth. "Is there anything you want to talk about? Anything you need to tell me?" He smiled and shook his head. "Everything's great." Amanda texted him during dessert. I saw his screen light up. He silenced it without reading the message. Work stuff, he said. I smiled back. Of course. Then I paid for dinner with our joint credit card and forwarded the receipt to Patricia. Evidence of normalcy before the storm. Patricia's forensic accountant found something interesting. Over the past 8 months, Jake had been slowly transferring money from the business account to a personal account I didn't have access to. Small amounts. 500 here. 1,000 there. Amounts small enough that I wouldn't notice in the monthly statements. But they added up. He'd moved almost $40,000. That money should have been split between us as business partners. Instead, he was hiding it. Building a nest egg for his new life with Amanda. What Jake didn't know was that Patricia had gotten a court order giving her access to all his financial records. We watched every transaction. Documented every transfer. Let him keep digging his hole deeper. He was so confident he'd get away with it. That confidence would destroy him. Amanda called me 3 weeks after the baby shower. She was crying. I need help, she said. I don't have insurance for the baby. Jake said he'd add me to his policy, but it's not going through. I knew exactly why it wasn't going through. I'd called the insurance company 2 days earlier and had myself removed from Jake's policy entirely. That meant he had to re-enroll during open enrollment, which wasn't for another 5 months. Amanda's due date was in 6 weeks. Without insurance, delivering a baby would cost at least $15,000. Maybe more if there were complications. That's terrible, I said, my voice full of fake sympathy. Have you talked to Jake about it? She sniffled. He says he's working on it. She wasn't calling for advice. She was calling to see if I'd offer to help pay. I didn't. I just said I hoped everything worked out and hung up. Amanda was about to learn what love without a safety net felt like. I spent the next week removing myself from everything. I closed our joint credit cards. Removed myself as a co-signer on Jake's car loan. Went to the county clerk and filed paperwork to legally return to my maiden name. Every shared financial tie between us, I cut. Cleanly. Efficiently. By the time I was done, we were married in name only. Patricia reviewed every document. Perfect, she said. When he realizes what you've done, it'll be too late. I asked what would happen next. She smiled. He's going to try to file for divorce first. Men like him always do. They want to control the narrative. But you're already 3 steps ahead. She was right. 2 days later, Jake came home and handed me divorce papers. He'd filed that morning. He looked almost proud of himself. I just smiled and said, that's fine. My papers had been filed 3 days earlier. With a full asset freeze attached. The asset freeze hit Jake's business account on a Tuesday morning. I knew because Amanda called me screaming. What did you do? She yelled. Jake's account is frozen. He can't close his deal. Apparently, Jake had a major client ready to sign a contract that morning. The payment was supposed to hit his account that afternoon. $50,000. But because of the court order, the account was locked pending the divorce proceedings. No money in. No money out. Amanda had been there with him when he got the notification. She'd watched him call the bank. Watched him panic. Watched their future dissolve in real time. I didn't do anything, I said calmly. The court did. Maybe you should have thought about that before sleeping with my husband. Then I hung up. Patricia had warned me this would happen. That Jake would try to blame me. That he'd call me crazy. That he'd tell anyone who would listen that I was destroying him out of spite. The forensic accountant finished his report. It showed that Jake had used business funds to pay for Amanda's baby shower. The decorations. The catering. The cake. Even the balloons that spelled out baby shower in my living room. He'd paid for all of it with money that legally belonged to both of us. Patricia added it to our evidence file. This is considered embezzlement, she explained. He stole from the business to fund his personal life. That's a crime. She paused. And Amanda benefited from stolen money. She's implicated too. I thought about Amanda's smile at that party. Her hand resting on her pregnant belly while my husband touched her in my house. All of it funded by theft. All of it recorded in bank statements that would now be read in court. They weren't just cheaters. They were criminals. And now they were both under investigation. The divorce hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, Patricia filed a motion for me to be awarded the house. She argued that I'd made the down payment using inheritance money from my grandmother. That my name was on the mortgage first. That I'd paid for most of the renovations. The judge agreed. 2 weeks before the hearing, I got the order. The house was mine. Jake had 30 days to remove his belongings and vacate. Amanda's baby was due in 3 weeks. That nursery she'd set up in my guest room? That crib Jake had built? All of it had to go. I changed the locks on day 29. Jake showed up on day 30 with a moving truck, and the locks were already different. He had to call a lawyer to get supervised access to retrieve his things. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. My lawyer handled everything. Amanda posted something on social media that week. A crowdfunding campaign. Unexpected medical bills was the title. The description talked about being a single mother facing hardship. About needing community support. About how expensive babies were. She'd set the goal at $20,000. So far, she'd raised $300. Someone sent me the link. I read through the comments. Most were from people calling her out. "Isn't that baby your friend's husband's kid?" one person wrote. "Maybe ask him for money instead of strangers." Another comment said, "My sister was at that baby shower." You're not a victim. Even Amanda's parents had stopped answering her calls, according to mutual friends. Her mother had told someone at church that she was embarrassed by the whole situation. Amanda was unraveling. Publicly. Messily. And I didn't feel bad watching it happen. The divorce hearing finally arrived. Patricia had prepared everything perfectly. She presented the evidence methodically. The affair. The hidden money. The embezzlement. The timeline showing how Jake had been planning his exit while lying to my face. Jake's lawyer tried to argue that I was equally responsible for the business problems. That I'd frozen the accounts out of spite. Patricia shut it down immediately. My client exercised her legal right to protect shared assets during divorce proceedings. If Mr. Hayes had been honest about his finances from the start, this wouldn't have been necessary. The judge reviewed everything. At the end, she awarded me 60% of the business. The house. Half of Jake's retirement account. And a clause that prevented him from starting a competing business for 3 years. Jake went pale. His lawyer asked for a recess. It was denied. The business he'd built, that we'd built, was mostly mine now. I sold the business 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Jake's biggest competitor had been interested in acquiring it for years. When they heard it was available, they made an offer immediately. I accepted. The sale included all client contracts, intellectual property, and the company name. The buyer called me the day after the papers were signed. "We're restructuring," he said. "We won't be needing Jake's services anymore." Jake had been working there as a contractor, trying to rebuild his income. Now he was unemployed. The business he'd started, the one he'd poured 5 years of work into, was gone. Sold to someone who immediately fired him. Patricia had warned me this might happen. Selling to his competitor is legal, she'd said. Cold, but legal. I didn't feel cold. I felt free. Finally, completely free. A letter arrived at my new apartment 3 months after the divorce. Jake's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won. The letter was 2 pages long. Rambling and desperate. "I miss the way you kept me grounded," he wrote. "I made a terrible mistake. Amanda isn't who I thought she was. We fight constantly. The baby cries all night. I can't afford anything anymore. I miss our life." He wanted me back. Not because he loved me. Because his new life was falling apart. Because Amanda had turned out to be exhausting. Because being a father was harder than he'd imagined. I read the letter twice. Then I put it in a folder and took it to Patricia. "Save this," she said. "If he ever tries to modify the settlement or claim hardship, we'll use it to show his choices led to his current situation." I never responded. I didn't need to. Amanda showed up at my apartment door 6 months after the baby was born. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. The baby wasn't with her. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I didn't invite her in. We stood in the hallway. She told me how hard everything was. How Jake barely helped. How her parents had cut her off financially. How she couldn't afford daycare. How she regretted everything. "Are you happy now?" she finally asked, her voice breaking. I looked at her for a long moment. The friend I'd trusted for 12 years. The woman who'd attended my wedding and held my hand through miscarriages. The person who'd betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. I didn't answer her question. I just stepped back and closed the door. I heard her crying in the hallway. Eventually, she left. I never saw her again. The final court judgment came through that fall. Full custody of the baby went to Amanda. Child support from Jake was set at $1,500 a month based on his current unemployment status. Once he found work, it would increase. A restraining order prevented either of them from contacting me for any reason. If they violated it, they'd face legal consequences. Patricia handed me the documents in her office. "They built a life on lies," she said. "Now they're stuck in it together." I signed the final papers. It was over. Completely, legally over. They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry they got caught. Sorry their plan didn't work. Sorry I fought back. But they were never actually sorry. And I was never going to forgive them. Not because I was bitter. But because they didn't deserve it. I used the money from selling the business to buy a small house across town. 2 bedrooms. A little yard. Enough space for me to breathe and start over. I got a new job at a marketing firm that actually valued my work. The pay was good. The people were kind. Nobody there knew about Jake or Amanda. I was just myself. Not someone's wife. Not someone's betrayed friend. Just me. I planted flowers in the front yard. Painted the walls colors I actually liked. Bought furniture that was mine alone. I went to therapy and worked through the anger and the hurt. Slowly, carefully, I rebuilt my life into something better than it had been before. Starting over wasn't easy. But it was worth it. And it was cheaper than staying small. Cheaper than accepting lies. Cheaper than pretending I was okay when I wasn't. A year after everything fell apart, I went to dinner with new friends I'd made at work. We laughed until our sides hurt. Made plans for a weekend trip. Talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. Driving home that night, I realized I'd gone the whole evening without thinking about Jake or Amanda once. They weren't part of my story anymore. I wasn't defined by what they'd done to me. I was defined by what I'd built after they left. I thought about the girl who'd walked into her house soaking wet to find a baby shower she wasn't invited to. She'd felt small and powerless and broken. But she wasn't any of those things. She'd been a storm. She just hadn't realized it yet. I wasn't Jake's wife. I wasn't Amanda's friend. I was the woman who'd survived their betrayal and come out stronger. And that was enough.